Good afternoon, friends. Let's talk about something that's a little close to my heart. That is Facebook paganism. Now, Facebook pagans are an interesting group because you get kind of a mix of about three different groups. You get young pagans, who you often find on other sites like Tumblr and Instagram, Twitter, all that kind of jazz. You have your decent folks who are skeptical, have been around for a while, and they kind of get what's going on. And then you have the racist assholes. We're not going to talk about them today. No. We're going to talk about one specific subgroup, and that's the young pagans, who fall into the trap, as we call in the pagan community, of woo. So, recently I went into a group that honors Loki on Facebook. As a Norse heathen myself, I'm interested in joining up with different groups, seeing what the community's like, and I found some interesting things in that group. Now again, this was thankfully not the nasty, bigoted, folkish type, but it was the young, easily susceptible to woo type. So what I mean by that is you're going to see a lot of people in this group who claim to literally hear the gods as if I was talking to you, or feel the gods, see the gods as if they're right next to you, which to me is extremely concerning for a number of reasons that I'm going to get into a little bit later. So you could see a post, for example, of someone saying, oh, I offered Loki some Fanta the other day. Okay, cool. I've done that before. I've been in a pinch and offered some seemingly silly things as an offering. But then after that, there is, and I kid you not, a conversation written down between this person and who they perceive to be Loki. And it's a pretty detailed conversation. So that tips me off right away. This person's probably a little bit more young, probably a little bit more susceptible to the woo. But it got me thinking, as I was scrolling through, I saw a lot of this. A lot of directly perceiving gods or directly interacting with gods in physical space, which, as many of you know, is a little bit concerning because on the one hand, okay, people can be making that shit up. And on the other hand, people could be seeing experiences that they want to see. Psychological suggestion is a very, very powerful thing. If you go into something wanting to see something as a positive sign of a deity, or if you go into something wanting to have a spiritual experience, you're more likely to. It's just how our brains are wired. But the third category of what's possibly going on, and this is the least likely, but it is something important to bring up, is that people are having experiences, that tie into symptoms of mental illness. And, before I get a lot of hate comments on this, I have experienced this myself. I was diagnosed with PTSD years ago based on some shit that happened in college. And when it got really, really bad, I actually had hallucinations of my abusive ex. That's all I'm going to go into with that. But I swore that I could see him clear as day right in front of me. No one else could corroborate that. He wasn't there. It was a figment of my mind's imagination. It was my brain's way of dealing with someone who had scarred me so badly that even 2 years later, I felt like I could physically see him in front of me. Now again, this is not the most common thing that's happening in these circumstances, but it is really, really concerning that people are playing into this idea that gods can be physically seen, interacted with, spoken to, just like anybody else. And this is a trap a lot of young pagans fall into, and I, for one, want to challenge this. Unfortunately, in some of these groups, they kind of have rules against that. You can disagree with someone, but people in the past have brought up being a little bit more skeptical about these kind of experiences, and usually they're kind of brushed off as, oh, just let people have their fun. But a lot of times, these people will eventually get banned, and they're not being rude about it either. They're not saying, oh, you shouldn't believe in this, you're mentally ill. They're not being an asshole about it. They're saying, hey, maybe apply the slightest bit of skepticism because you could be leading yourself to these kinds of experiences. They may not actually be happening the way that you think they are. A lot of these people, like I said, either get shoved under the rug or outright banned. So these kinds of Facebook groups turn into echo chambers where particularly young pagans are getting the impression that in order to experience the gods, you have to see them or feel them right in front of you as if they were another person. And this is really concerning because some of these posts they're a little explicit, actually. I saw a post one time that said someone was making some food in the kitchen and claimed that they felt Loki slap them on the ass. I don't really know what else to say about that other than, what? Again, if you are perceiving a god, a deity, slapping you on the ass like you would any physical flesh and blood human, there's something wrong with that. Use a little skepticism. Again, I've been through this myself. Periods of wanting to believe certain things. I'll give you an example very briefly. I laid out an offering a while back, and the way that my altar is set up is that my offering cups are in different places. One of them is a little bit closer to the window, and I always keep the blinds open so I can get the natural light in. So after about 5 or 6 days, I had noticed that the offering in one cup was super duper moldy. Like it was dead, time to throw it out. And another one, perfectly intact. So at first, my wishful thinking was kind of like, ooh, I wonder if this particular deity appreciated a little bit more or took a little bit more from it than the other one. Or I kind of started rationalizing in my mind, well, this particular deity whose offering was a little bit more moldy, the question that I'd asked and the advice that I'd asked for was a little bit more in his wheelhouse than in the other one. And then a couple days later, I was like, you know what? I had a hunch that there's a scientific explanation for this. I love science. I am studying anthropology. I love physics, biology. All this stuff is really fascinating to me. So I looked it up. Turns out sunlight inhibits the growth of mold. So the one that was closer to the sun wasn't growing mold, not because the deity in question just didn't like it that much or, just whatever other explanation you could come up with. It was because it was closer to the sun. Simple as that. And that little bit of skepticism saved me from assuming something that was wildly untrue. And this is something that is missing so often from these pagan groups. And so when they get these young people involved, it worries me because in the off chance that these people are struggling with mental illness, and again, this is a very small percentage, but that does not make it okay. You can lead people to believe these kinds of things and indulge in these kinds of things, even when it's dangerous. And that's not a safe mentality, even for people who don't experience mental illness. And again, I am someone who does. These kinds of suggestions are dangerous because it can lead people to make life choices based on things that aren't actually spiritual experiences. And it can lead people to think that these kinds of things are not only normal, but expected. To where if you aren't experiencing the gods in the same way, if you're not getting Loki to slap your ass, or if you're not hearing Odin whisper in your ear, as if someone else were doing that, as if a flesh and blood human was doing that, maybe you're just not as pagan. Maybe you don't really see the gods like I do. And that's how cults are made. And that is how people are sucked in to experiences that that aren't really happening. And I'm going to make another video about that because I've had a personal experience with a cult mentality forming like that. But this is almost 10 minutes long, and I don't know how I've talked so long. So hopefully you'll have a nice day. I'm going to sit here and drink my peace tea. Just be good to each other, okay? Have a good one.